this episode of K9s Talking Sense. I'm your host, Cameron Ford. Welcome to episode number 105. This episode is going to get into the field of biodetection dogs. Biodetection dogs, like conservation detection dogs, is one of the growing industries within the detection dog community. One of the best parts about this growing field is that you don't have to have that previous military law enforcement experience that most people feel prohibits them from getting jobs in working detection dogs. The growth of these other detection dog disciplines, like this one, allows you opportunities to find ways to work detection dogs if that's your passion. So this episode is dedicated to the specific detection dog discipline of C. difficile. C. difficile is a type of infectious disease that you can get while your immune system is compromised. And in most cases, this is in a hospital environment. These amazing dogs work in a hospital environment to locate areas where C. difficile might be smeared or have been kind of contaminated. And these dogs help identify areas that may be needing more cleaning or maybe that had been cleaned, but we missed an area. These are amazing dogs, and the difference that they can make to the safety of a hospital environment can't be underestimated. So I hope you guys enjoy some of the information that we're going to share about this. I also wanted to add, we've been reached out to by many of you wanting to know when we're doing seminars, where we're doing seminars at, and you can find all this information at fordk9.com. Click on the events and it shows you everything we're doing for the rest of the year and where we are doing it at. I also have some exciting news. We are already taking bookings for 2025, but in 2025, I have a whole new lecture format. We have learned some things throughout these years of traveling and doing seminars that I'm now going to apply in 2025. One of those is going to be specific daily topics. So when we come out and do a seminar, each day will be a specific topic, and we'll work dogs that can demonstrate or show what we talked about in the lecture. So this is a fun, new, exciting format with numerous different topics that allow you guys to choose from when you bring us out for seminars. Also, can't thank our sponsors enough. Get Sent for being one of our biggest supporters for this podcast, and also Precision Explosives. Those companies, please go support them. If you're looking for training odors or you're looking for something to absorb your training odor with safely, these companies provide those tools. Get Sent tubes are designed to absorb odors. There's an episode I did, number 103, with the founder, Gregory Heron, where he talks about all the common questions that come with Get Sent tubes. Also, if you guys have any topics that you guys would like us to talk about, shoot me an email. Send us to info@fordk9.com. I'd love to hear your feedback and what we could go talk about in the future. Also, again, go visit our website for the different membership. We are doing special events for our gold members, special Q&As, special video sharings, video reviews, and there's going to be now a private Facebook group for all the gold members to share videos, go over training topics, to cultivate as a community where we can all learn from each other. And Natalie and I will do video reviews of videos submitted and post those on the group. So without taking any more time, let's get to the episode. Hey everybody, welcome to this episode of K9s Talking Sense. On this episode, I'm lucky to have somebody who's just completed our K9 or detection dog training course, and they have a special detection discipline that I thought you guys would enjoy. So I want to introduce everybody to Laleh. I'm not going to even try to pronounce your last name, so you can say it for us.
Aksu.
Aksu. So tell us what you do, the type of detection dogs that you work and train with.
Okay, so our discipline is called C. difficile. So we train dogs in the hospital to detect C-dif, that's for short for C. difficile, in the environment. So what our dogs do is they screen the environment, they look around where there's cross-contamination, and then we have a team with us who will come with us and clean it up.
Okay. So for those who don't know, what is C. difficile and why is it important to have dogs search this out?
C-dif is a bacteria that will grow in your tummy floor really well. So it means basically that you're going to have massive diarrhea. that basically can make you really, really sick, and it's a hospital-acquired infection.
Okay. So basically, these dogs work in a hospital environment.
Yes.
Now, are they looking for people with it, or are they looking for the C-dif on the surface, on the ground? Like, how do you guys go about doing that?
Yeah, that's a very good question. So we do not look at people. We always say people are icky. We look actually at the environment. So what can happen is if we have a C-dif patient, is that we can have cross-contamination from that particular patient spread through the hospital, through the environment, like say with gloves, or people could smear it on a chair and then somebody else would sit in there. So our dogs actually look at the environment that people move in. So through the hallways, the bathrooms, all those kind of type of things that we look through in the hospital.
Okay. So basically what we're doing is we're dealing with something that could be like an infectious type disease, and what you're trying to do is locate areas where it might exist and then clean it up or get rid of it or whatever.
Yes, exactly. So what we do is, so if my dog would go to a chair and alert on a chair, so we would have cross-contamination of fecal on there where C-dif is carried in. And so we have a team with us. We have our environmental services, our infection control team, and a nurse or somebody else who is responsible for the unit, who will then be determined who is going to be responsible for this particular item, and they will clean it up in matter of like 10 to 20 minutes.
Okay. How contagious is C-dif?
C-dif is pretty contagious in the way if you have the right formula to it. So that means a healthy person is not going to acquire C-dif.
Okay.
But if you're on antibiotics, or if you are in the oncology department, so you have cancer medications, chemo or something, bone marrow, transplants, all those kind of patients are highly at risk. If you're coming out of surgery, you are also at risk for these type of things.
So I would assume like a lot of hospitals must have C-dif dogs. I mean, I would think if this is something that is kind of could be prevalent, I guess, in potential hospitals, maybe even with cleaning procedures, having dogs that do this. So is it a common thing that a lot of hospitals have dogs that do this?
No, actually, we're the only program in North America who actually has operational dogs. There's a lot of people who have done proof of concepts of it, but we have the only working crew, if you want to call it that way. And we are Vancouver Coastal Health, so we serve all our hospitals in that area that is responsible for that. And that's about, I think, 12 to 15 hospitals that we serve.
Okay. How many dogs do you guys have for a program like this?
Right now we have 4 working dogs who are certified. Every year our dogs have to go through testing where we do an ORT test, an area surge test, and then we also search the hospital as well. So we have 3 parts to it. So our dogs have to be validated, like every other detection regulation thing as well. And so we have 4 upcoming as well. So we are working up to 8 dogs.
Okay. So my next question is, how did you get into this kind of program? What is tell us about you and what is your background, and how did you land in a position where you have dogs trained to find a disease like this? That's obviously very rare. So I just wanted to kind of know about you, and then how did you land here?
So myself, I moved here about 19 years ago. If I say here, I mean Canada, not quite the U.S. So we're up in Canada. So 19 years ago, I came here and I started training dogs instead of horses. I actually extremely came out of the horse history of training and switched over because I simply couldn't afford a horse out here. So I went to dogs. And from there, I started training. I opened up my own boarding kennel that's been running for 11 years. And I've been training ever since as well. I want to say 15 years now about. And then, because that's why I say the boarding kennel is important, is when COVID hit, our boarding kennel really went down. I think we had one dog or something. And my friend Teresa Zurberg, who's actually the co-founder of this program, did a shout out that she needs somebody to help her with a special project. And that special project was COVID. Of course, they weren't allowed to say it at that time. And so that's how I hopped onto this unit to help them out. And then because COVID didn't, like we did a proof of concept and we did do a long care term project as well with them that we proved that these dogs could work in an environment as well. However, that kind of then all shut down. And so I went over to the C-dif site and basically I'm their lead trainer now.
Okay. So did C-dif exist before you guys tried COVID dogs, or did it come after COVID dogs?
Yes.
So it was before. Okay.
Yes. So C-dif always has been there. It's been running for, I think, 8 years now. And Teresa Zurberg actually herself had C-dif when she was on chemo treatment. And so she knows herself how that feels like and how much that sucks. And so what happened was that her husband and a microbiologist, Dr. Elizabeth Bryce, and then her husband's name is Marcus, they talked about it, and then they kind of came up with this idea that, hey, Teresa, could you not train a dog to smell this out? And Teresa said, well, if it has a smell, I should be able to train this. So that's kind of how this whole idea came about.
Okay, so let's get into the training of these type of dogs. Obviously, it's a disease, right? Something they have to be careful of when you're handling it. So talk us through, I guess, first, what I would call the odor hygiene process. How do you get a sample? How do you protect it so you guys can use it? Then the next thing is, can dogs get C-dif if by simply smelling it?
Yeah. So that's very good questions. So yes, that makes my specialty a little bit more problematic at times than others. So when we get our samples, so C-dif itself is actually, I think, a bio-level hazard 4, so it is not allowed to leave the laboratory setting. So what we do is we capture the smell of C-dif either on gauze or get sent tubes, those lovely tubes that we all train with. So our dogs are basically only trained on the VOCs of C. difficile. And what we do is, because then those training aids are safe in the environment, we can put it anywhere. Like we can go, say, to Home Depot and train there and we wouldn't infect anybody else. And so the dogs are not exposed to it itself as either. However, it's kind of the same rule with the dogs as well, if they could get C-dif or not. Some dogs do carry C-dif in their stool, but it doesn't make them sick. But same thing as for us, if we are not on antibiotics, we wouldn't get C-dif, and this is kind of the same rule with the dogs as well. We don't let them interact too much with the items either, because we don't want to have any cross-contamination of our dogs on those objects either. So it's a little bit more hands-off detecting than going right in there.
Okay. How do you get? I mean, like you said, so you're basically using some type of odor soak and barrier.
Yeah.
How do you guys get the samples to that? Is there like a biohazard kind of protocol that you guys have to have when even creating a training aid sample?
So that would be all the lab. So I have, unfortunately, nothing to do with the odor production. As we always say, they magically appear on our desk. So yes, it is a microbiologist who actually produces the odors for us. So we have a team that we connect to, we talk to, we tell them our problems, and then basically together we collaborate how we can make it the best for the dogs. So there is a formula somewhat for it, but it's all them in the lab. They do it.
Okay. So now that we're going to be training these dogs to do C-dif, walk us through like your process as it stands today. I know you came to school and there's things that you guys were evaluating and looking at, but as it stands, what do you guys do? How do you intro the odor? How long is this process take to go from how you guys start it to when the dog can go actually do the job.
Okay. So, well, just like how we learned in your classes is basically odor pace. We do imprint the dogs just on one strain only. I have 7 strains that I do train the dogs on, so that's my library. So I start with one strain, the same way as you would do maybe with narcotics or explosives. And you imprint the odor and you shape your indications, and then from there you go on basically to put it out in a more ORT kind of form, and ORT is odor recognition test form, where everything looks the same, but the dog has to learn to differentiate between what's right and what's wrong. So there could be an empty can and there could be a charged can, and which can is the right can. And then we get really deep into it, that our associates for our odors have to be learned very precise. And that means anything that has to do with the odor production. It could be gloves, it could be our Excel wipes, it can be anything like that we proofing our dogs off, negative fecal, all those kind of things. So our dogs have to learn really proficiently what the true odor is that they're looking for. After that, I usually go into the process where the dogs learn area searches. So how can I find this odor in our environment? And from there on, it's just basically proofing everything, coming up with scent pictures for them that they have to learn. Our dogs work mainly indoors, so we have like lots of air movement that's a bit funkier than, like, say, the outdoors. So our dogs really have to be technical skilled on that. And so I have trained personally 2 dogs from puppyhood on, where I had the dogs from 8 weeks old on. And I want to say at 1.5 years, I usually have them proficient enough that they can go to work. I usually wait a little bit with the odor. Like the imprinting phase, I want them environmentally sound first. Because I work in a hospital, I cannot influence my environment at all. It can be quite stressful. There can be noises from machines, like in the ICU, things that I can't hear, but my dog can hear. So I like to expose them more in a fun manner to all these environments first, and then I start my imprinting phase with them.
So
I don't know if that
that's and there's actually a couple good questions that I have because of that. So you said 7 different strains.
Yes.
So does that mean each strain smells different?
Yes, in some ways they smell alike, but they can also smell a bit different. So, for example, we have 1801, that would be like adult diarrhea. But then we have also 43598, and those ones are infant diarrhea. And then we just have the bacteria strains as well that have been discovered in this world. It's actually quite interesting. You're like, oh, this one was discovered in Belgium, and this one was discovered in whatever, Colorado or something. So there's a lot of information behind it too. But we found with these 7 strains, our dogs do really well to generalize on it.
Okay, so then that leads to this question. Is it different between male, female, different races, different ages? You mentioned babies, so that made me think of, is it different if somebody's older? What if somebody has, like you said, you mentioned cancer patients. Do any of these things affect the odor of the C-dif?
It doesn't per se affect the odor, because actually a lot of people in the hospital can smell if it's C-dif or not. However, what we can have is a colonized person and a person that's actually infected. So that means if somebody is colonized, that means they're asymptomatic, but they do have it in their tummy, and the dogs do smell that. Then in the hospital, we do test for toxin B only, but not for toxin A. And our dogs also pick up toxin A. So it's not so much the race or how old you are. that can differ, but it can have these different things in there.
Okay. Then I'm curious, we had talked a little bit, what type of breeds do you guys find successful, and why do you pick the breeds that you work with?
Yeah. So we picked the Spaniels. Spaniels are super happy dogs. And we just love their hunting enthusiasm. I never have to tell my Spaniel to go to work. They will just go to work. We also did pick the Spaniel because the Spaniel is very friendly looking. So we deal with a lot of people who are scared in the hospital. They have illnesses. So seeing a dog that's like nice to look at makes them often very happy. We always talk about pointy ears and floppy ears. So this is why we picked the Spaniel as well. But also I think they can hold up to any other shepherd in this world too. And I find the Spaniels don't have to do like a perimeter check or anything like this. Like how I said, I just love their enthusiasm, their honesty, all those kind of things, and they're just good characters. So
could these dogs perform a dual purpose function? Could they do maybe like therapy and go be a C-dif dog, or do you want to reduce the dog's interaction with patients in the environment, even though as helpful that might be for somebody who's stressed, we only want the dogs to do one job, or could you do this?
That's a very good question. So mainly we want our dogs only to be working dogs. I always say people are allowed to talk to my dog, but they are not allowed to pet my dog, for example. Because I always say, how would you feel when somebody is trying to pet you while you're at work? Like, oh, hey. It's usually our need that we have to touch the dogs, not the dogs wanting to say hello to us. That being said, I do think it gives a good rep in the hospital that we are there. But we do have, like, for example, Teresa is flying to Ottawa next week. So we have a flyer about working dog and what the procedure is with working dogs. Because usually people like to approach these dogs in the hospital, but we do keep them safe.
Okay. And you said it's about 18 months from training, and you guys prefer to raise them from puppies through the program. Tell us a little bit about why you would pick the dog why not do what a lot of programs do, which is go procure a dog that is 2 years old already or whatever it is, versus doing what you guys do, raising it from a puppy on up. Because there's a lot of times people go, oh, you're raising it from a puppy. There's so much cost involved. What if it doesn't work out? How do you deal with that potential versus going, oh, I can go buy a sure thing that's 2 years old and I've tested it and now I can go just train it, maybe train it even faster because it's older. I can get it done in 5 weeks, which is people always love to hear that I can get the dog done quickly, but as we know, that may not be the right option. But why do you guys go the way you guys go with this?
We like to raise our puppies because I just think you know what you have put into the dog. And especially because in our environment, our dogs have to be so comfortable in order to work. It's a very specialized environment that I do like growing them up in that environment. So that means I take the dog every day, like they learn elevators, they learn that people are pushing carts, that doors are open and closing. Like it's such an active environment all the time that I think I love teaching the puppies that this is a good thing to play in there. Going into the elevators, we have like a strict elevator procedure, how we putting the dogs in there. It's very funny because very often people will be like, oh, I didn't even know there was a dog on board. Like stuff like that. I like to give them time to grow up as well. I don't like them putting on odor quite too early because I always say a dog will not be scared, say, of a toy or a piece of food if he was doing a little hunt game in there. But they might be scared if like C-dif is now connected to this event. So I like to hold off on these things. Now, yes, it does sound great when you go out and you can buy a 2-year-old dog. And maybe it will only take you X amount of time. But is that really true? Because very often I see people too, they buy dogs and now that doesn't work out either. And now you have an adult in front of you. Here I can say usually by the age of 10, 12, months, kind of around there, that if this dog is going to work out in this environment or not, are they going to go through another fear period or not, all those kind of things. I guess I'm too controlling. I would like to know what my dog has done and what not, because then I can say, okay, well, maybe we didn't prep the dog for that. Or even though I prepped the dog for this is still not going right. And I think then I still can find a home for that dog because I know that dog so well.
Mm-hmm. So when you're going through this process, what is your guys' success rate? So how many, in this program as it exists so far, how many puppies have you guys raised and how many have made it through to the operational side of things?
Okay, so I personally raised 2 dogs, and I want to say both of, I've raised Artie, Anton, I've raised Kip, Disco is being raised as well by Teresa, and I want to say those guys are all gonna make it. Angus was the very first C-dif dog, and he was raised in the hospital by Teresa too, and he's just getting retired. He's 10 years old now, so our OG is being retired. So I want to say our success rate is at least 80% with doing this process.
Okay. Now, another what I would call like dual purpose question, because I look at it from the professional background that I have, where they like to try to get as much bang for their buck out of a dog. So could I train a C-dif dog and also train it to do another type of pathogen or disease?
No.
Okay. And why not?
So we don't train our dogs on 2 pathogens. So when my dog alerts, I cannot see it right away. So we do have tests afterwards that we can tell maybe that there's a lot of ATP on it. That's protein. You can swap for that. But really, that's not like the proof in the pudding, basically. Very often, my dogs will find like a C-dif room or something. And so I know, or this is the wheelchair of the C-dif person, and my dog has found it. That's kind of the affirmation I will get in my job. And that's about it. So if my dog is trained on 2 pathogens, say COVID and C-dif, how do I know that that is COVID and how is that C-dif? So we are very strict with our rule that our dogs are only trained on 1 pathogen.
Okay. When you're training this, I'm trying to think how I want to word this question. So operationally, this is a big topic now that I think about it. You just said you can't confirm necessarily when your dog indicates. So a common thing that happens in detection dog world is handlers don't want to reward their dogs until they know the dog has alerted to whatever the target odor is. In your world, it could be a ways away. It could be a period of time until you know. So do you guys reward when your dog indicates? And if so, what gives you that confidence? Like in some disciplines, it might be how dare you reward without knowing. So how do you guys answer that question? How do you guys do that?
We reward our dogs usually. I always say you must trust in your training in order to know what you're going to get operational. If my dog is having problems operational, I will analyze very much what is my problem, like what is the problem that I see, and how can I help that dog to work it out to the best he can. So we do reward, we trust. We did learn about the variable reinforcement here, so we may try it out. But usually we do reward our dogs for it because I do trust my training.
Now, do you guys use condition reinforcers and markers? So
yes,
basically
we do.
Like a click, or what do you guys use?
So we use the word freeze for my marker when my reward is going to come towards the dog, and if I want the dog coming off the reward, I say break. That's my release word.
Okay, so break comes off of odor to you for reward, and freeze, they stay there until you come up to them to reward there.
Exactly.
Okay. What type of rewards do you guys use? Do you guys use toys? Do you guys use food? I mean, I know it's a hospital environment, so what do you guys use?
We use typically food because I can just not break out in a game of tug like crazy if I'm around, like, say, in the ICU, the breathing machines and all this stuff. So we have to be careful with it. Also, sometimes you don't want to be too loud either because it is a hospital environment and people are in distress as well. So we use typically food, and I have to say our dogs are good. Like, they're very willing for food to work. So we just keep going with that. My dog at the end always gets his ball because he loves his ball the best. So when we come back to the elevators, he usually gets his ball. And that's kind of his end cue that he has done a good job today.
Okay. What would you say is the hardest part about training a C-diff dog? Like, what phase of training, or what is the hardest part to work through?
It's I want to say it's the step from just training to go to the real thing. That operational step is that leap of faith that the dog has to take, that they have to learn how to source it. Why I'm saying that is C-dif is usually like a smear pattern. So it's not just like a little dot somewhere on something that my dog can pinpoint and say, hey, it's right here. No, it could be just all over this chair, and my dog has to pinpoint on that. And so very often we will have dogs first who will source around, and you really have to learn that dog's language in order to trust that and then to keep reinforcing that. And then the dogs usually typically will settle on something, and then we keep reinforcing that. If I have C-dif rooms who have been terminally cleaned, so I know there was a C-dif patient in there. Now they had the UV machine in there in order to kill all the C-dif. If there's still reservoirs in there, I really love to bring my young dogs in there because I know if they're showing interest on something, I know it's at least C-dif.
Okay. So that brings me up to the operational aspect. How many fines per shift or per day do these dogs get when working in these environments?
Yeah, unfortunately for the hospital, we do have a high rate of findings. So I want to say in a typical day, if we are doing about 6 to 7 units, I want to say the average alert rate.
When you say unit, how many, is that a room or is that?
No, that means the whole entire, like, so if it's, say, neurology, it's the whole thing. So
and how many rooms on average is that?
Well, we don't really go into patient rooms.
Okay.
We screen the, like, say, the hallways, the clean supply rooms, the lockers where people put their stuff in, storage rooms, all those kind of things. But we typically don't go into a patient room because we have tests for that. So we don't really need to go in there. We only go in there if they're terminally cleaned. And then particularly for C-dif. We can have sometimes other ones too, but usually the dogs don't find much there because there was no C-dif patient in there. So I want to say the average alert rate is at least 2 per unit.
Wow. Okay. So these dogs are getting pretty good level of experience operationally. It means they're in the environment's reinforcing to them because they do make fines. How do you combat, let me go to this direction first. False alerts. How often do you guys get those, and can you verify it's a false alert?
Well, yes and no. So when I see a dog who just goes up to an object operantly, I know it's not right. So we all know, and that's what we learn, is we learn the language of the dog. If that pre-behavior is not there, it's most likely not right. So, I mean, unless it's really spelled out, I don't know. But I want my dog to hunt. I want to see that hunt. I want to see that change of behavior. And then typically that's what I will reward them.
So it comes down to, of course, reading your dog.
Absolutely.
Yeah. The important part of knowing your dog, reading your dog, understanding those little nuances to know this is predictable, repeatable, reliable as an indication that something's there, which is huge, right?
Yes.
So do you guys, because of the find ratio, how often or do you guys do blank searches? I mean, I guess you guys are getting blanks in a sense.
We will have 0 alert units.
Yeah.
And we usually high five them.
Good.
And everyone is excited, just not the dog.
Yeah. Now, do you guys reward on blanks?
Absolutely. So if my dog is working and they're working their butt off, like to go in every crack and do this whole unit, he will always have his play at the end because he still worked. If he found something or not, he still did his job. He was sincere about working it. But just because there was no cross-contamination, I don't want to fault him for, not finding. And I think sometimes you can have these false alerts happening because the dog wants to find something in order to get something. So yes, I certainly reward blanks.
I guess the question I have is, because you guys are showing that this is a productive type of resource, or like we call it in the world I come from, mission asset, it's doing something. What is the benefit that a hospital gets? Is it saving them money? What would incentivize hospitals to say, you know what, we need dogs like this in our facilities, because does it save money? Does it what does it do overall for the big picture of a hospital?
Yes. So absolutely, I think it's very beneficial for the hospital. So yes, they're saving money in cases. That's a big thing, and that's what people are most interested in. The benefits that we personally often see is actually the conversation that we're creating, how to do something better. So policies and procedures, how to clean something and how to keep cross-contamination down. So for example, we have like this big poster campaign in the hospital that says, gloves are not magic. Because just because you wear gloves doesn't mean you cannot cross-contaminate. If you have touched C-dif with your glove and you're still walking around in the hallway with it, well, then you're still spreading it. So our hospital just recently in Seychelles, BC, they have a rule that no one is allowed in the hallways with gloves, for example. And these are these conversations that we spark. And what I always find is the dogs are just not biased. So they look at the unit not like, ooh, how can I get these people? They're more like, they will go to the source. So there's like other things where the dogs will find something that is not typical for us. Like very often I get staff saying, well, that alert doesn't make sense because no one is using this object. And you're like, well, but because no one is using this object, that's why nobody's responsible for cleaning it. And usually it's been just used as storage. So people put things on and then take it off and all this stuff. And then it's an object in no one's land. And so this way we do create attention to these things. So we're looping back to the hospital saving money. So every C-dif patient costs about 27,000 Canadian dollars. I don't know what that is right now in American.
$2 in US dollar.
Exactly. So there's a big cost actually attached to a C-dif patient to take care of them. Now also it's an acquired infection that usually happens because of the hospital. So the hospital is interested in keeping these things very low because it would be them at fault that this patient has C-dif.
So then why don't more hospitals want a resource like this? Because obviously if it's cost savings and it's something that's beneficial, not only reducing the spread of something that is obviously very unpleasant and could be potentially more harmful, why is it not widely accepted? That's surprising to me that there's this resource out there. You guys now have a 10-year history?
Yeah, 8 years.
8 years of doing it and showing that it works. It blows me. Like, I'm surprised. Like, you guys have kind of proved the concept.
Yes.
What's the hang up?
The hang up, I think, is not enough exposure that this actually exists. And people who really want to support it. Some hospitals are shy of having dogs in the hospital.
I can see that.
All those kind of things. Then we are the only operational team. So nobody, like in the biomedical detection world, very often people do a proof of concept, but they don't have those dogs working properly other than the diabetic dogs and all that. So I think that's hard too. How do we get a dog out of a laboratory setting to an operational setting? These are hurdles. But of course, funding, exposure, all those kind of things.
It's like they say, educating the consumer that there's something here. And it's, I mean, clearly I'm obviously a dog person, so there's a lot of this here. Like it's a no-brainer. But is there a risk to the dogs being in a hospital environment? Are they carriers? Are they passers of disease? I mean, if people have a compromised immune system, is there something that the person could get a risk of getting because of a dog in the space?
So our dogs go twice a year to the veterinarian, get checked up. They get dewormed. They have all their shots, all those kind of things. So we are covered on that end, I would say. But there is people who just plain don't like dogs. So that sometimes is a hard part to deal with. We are very lucky. Vancouver Coastal Health is very pro-dog, and a lot of people really love these dogs. So we haven't seen any risk with the dogs of spreading anything. Like if our dogs are sick, they're not going to go to work that day. We're very strict on that policy. The dogs are not allowed to eliminate in the hospital. That's also something. And then as handlers, you are very much in charge of keeping that dog safe. Now, if a dog, we know that in every public setting, if a dog maybe growls or something, that's things that you don't want to, but that's why we did choose the Spaniels as well.
Do these dogs go home with you guys every night? Do they live at the hospital? How is that part?
So these dogs do go home with their handlers every night. And then we do have our 2 COVID dogs we have 2 foster families who take them home as well every day. Unless they just come in to work with us or have a work assignment, then I'll take them on and take them home with me as well. So yes, no dogs in the hospital.
Okay. There was something we had talked about before, and I'm going to circle back to the operational utilization of the dogs. And you mentioned it, and we talked about fringing part of it, but was fringing and for those that are like listening and watching this, fringing just means the dog is not able to be at source or chooses to for whatever the reason. Maybe the odor is stronger than away from source, a number of different reasons, but handlers and trainers have a lot of concern about fringing, and rightly so in a lot of ways. But you said something to me that was kind of surprising in the operational aspect is your dogs have to smell the C-dif from, a lot of cases, outside the door. So they get a sniff of a doorway and tell you they can smell C-dif in a room that's smeared on something. So that tells me a couple things. Well, one, C-dif must be really, really strong as an odor. But 2, that the dog has to learn to indicate without really getting to source. So how do you guys do that? And then added at the end of that, what is the dog's indication?
Okay, so yes, fringing is always a problem, I think, in every detection world type of thing. So when our dogs come to a C-dif room, for example, and they show a lot of interest, I will tell my dog that they're a good dog. Mm-hmm. They won't throw their final response there because they're not quite there. And in training, we very much train the dogs to go to source. So we kind of counter off, basically. So if they can, please work as far as you can and then tell me about it. So my boy, when he says he cannot go any further, he'll actually sit in front of me. But that is not a response I ever taught him. This is a response that he has chosen to communicate to me. Hey, I smell it, but I can't get to it. You need to do your job now. And that means maybe opening up a cupboard, or taking all, like sometimes everything in the hospital is shoved together. So you have your blood pressure machine, you have your bladder scanner and all this stuff. So we put things apart of each other, and then we screen it one more time with our dog to see if they can come to source, basically. Our final response is usually a freeze or look back to us. Basically, hey, I have found it. How I said, sometimes they cannot pinpoint on the object where it is, but we try to work it as close as possible for them. I will not punish fringes because I think my dog is trying to communicate, and I think he's honest about it too. Hey, I can't do this. You need to do your part. And sometimes, that's where the logic of the handler comes into, to look at the situation and say, okay, this is what it is. But I'm always very proud when our dogs do not indicate, say, on the item in front of the C-dif room, that they say, oh, I'm settling on this item, but it's actually in the room. Okay. So it's a lot of fluency that you have to be flexible. Watch your dog daily. It is not just ABC with them.
I think a lot of detection disciplines would agree with that. It's about being able to know the dog and being able to read through, because I think, in my opinion, just knowing what you guys have done and what you told me, because you have a significant amount of time invested in your training and the build-up, so it's not rushed, it makes it easier for you guys to read these nuances that are happening. Like the dog's like, I'm in odor, but I can't get to source. You guys can read it and go, okay, good. And then at the next level, sniff the things that can get closer to it. But in training, be able to say, hey, get close to it. And that history keeps the dog strong and focusing on odor. Even if I can't get to it, I need to tell you, not just give up because I can't get to it. So there's definitely, from what I understand, a good balance of going, okay, acknowledging odor, reinforcing that, and then giving even stronger reinforcement when they can get at source.
Yes, exactly.
And both are valuable because you need to be able to have the dog tell you, it's here, but I can't get to it. And then when I can get to it, I do this one specifically, this type of indication specifically. So that matches a lot of things in detection dog work. How did you guys train for that in any way? To train for, like you said, you kind of mentioned it, where you have barriers, I guess, sometimes, and the dog needs to learn that I can't get to it, but I still need to tell you. Is that hard to do in training? And what do you do first? Do you teach the effort to odor, or do you only reinforce the beginning when they're at source? Like what comes first, the chicken or the egg on that one?
We do reinforce first to odor, just like your
build
odor,
the strength to source.
Exactly, like your odor paste boxes is basically that simple a picture of it. Like, you put your nose on it, I feed you, right? And so we transfer that into our environmental searches, where I prep the dog as well with it. And then we come up with riddles, yes, where we have barriers, like sometimes our studio looks like this crazy thing with all these things in it. And, we put the height right in the middle, and our dog has to be like in front of it. And we're like, okay, I can move this. And, sometimes when you move it, you also move odor with it. Are they going to alert on the item that you moved, or are they going to fight deeper in? So, yes, we think every day about how to make these dogs stronger, so that they can fight for it, that they don't get discouraged. And that's what we do on the job, too. Like, if I see 5 items mushed together, well, let's separate them. I'll do something over there. My crew separates it for me, and then I have my dog go down. And it's very incredible to see how the dog will then pick out that specific item. We just had a really cool find, not on my dog, but on Crystal's and Artie. So Artie was the dog, where he had a line of wheelchairs, and then he had a shelving above it that had, 100 million things on it. Wheelchair cushions, they were all stacked up on there, all this stuff. So wheelchairs you can never clean. They always will have fecal cross-contamination on it, as much as you don't want to know it, but yes, they're always dirty. So we had to pull down bit by bit the items, and the dog did find the particular item that we didn't even think of at all. Like, that would have been not my guess at all. Looking at the shelving, it was actually these towels who were wrapped up, who very often are used for, if you want to prep up an arm or something for a patient. And yeah, he found it, and he was insistent that it was up top. So even though very often things are on nose level reach, I want to say, with cross-contamination, it's not like you guys have to search the ceilings. We don't have to do that typically, but we do prep our dogs for those things as well. High, low, in, out, all those things. But of course, they get good at their repeated picture over and over again. But that dog was so insistent that it was on top of there. And I have to say, as a trainer in the background, I was so proud of my handler and the dog, how persistent they were to work that particular problem.
Yeah, no, and it goes to show that you guys put a significant amount of time into inaccessibles.
Yes.
And because that's a reality in your world. It's a reality in a lot of detection worlds, but a lot of times our training focuses on what's kind of easy at the surface. We like doing things.
We do have a lot of things outside as well, so our dogs will learn to deal with that too. Like on a cupboard, it's most likely outside. But yes, we do have them fight for inaccessibles as well.
I guess I'll ask before we end it, what has been a really cool search that you've done with a dog that you gave one right there? Is there one that you've gone through yourself that you were like, I'm just totally amazed by this dog and what it could do?
Well, I'm amazed by him every day. I'm the biggest fan of my dog, hands down. He's incredible in what he does.
And by the way, it is the biggest Springer Spaniel you've ever seen.
He sure is.
Yes.
He's called Moose.
Yeah, he definitely
For that
is.
reason, his name is Anton. But yes, Moose. Well, it wasn't a very cool search, but how it tied in was I already found this particular, like how I described this thing. And Anton and I that day screened the gym on the ground level, and they were, I think, at level 2 or something of the hospital. And my dog went into that gym and was right away like, oh, this is Disneyland for me, because people also don't wash their hands down there. Anyways, he alerted on this stretcher gym bench who had duct tape on it as well. Like people in the hospital love to use tape and leave it there for the next 10 years, and we wonder why there's C-dif on it. Anyhow, he alerted on this bench, but one of those rolls was also on that gym stretcher bed thingy. I don't know what to call it properly. Anyhow, later in our debrief with the hospital, we learned that these towel wrap things are made on this particular table. And how basically from there the C-dif spread up top, and that the dogs were in unison of that dog alerted up there and this dog alerted down here. I don't know. I thought that was a little bit of magic in that day where you're like, yes, we're doing the right thing.
And it confirms for you good training and the ability of the dogs, and the more important thing, reading and trusting your dog. Now, you guys are in an interesting career field because we get asked all the time, because we're a school training people to work detection dogs. Well, I'm not military. I'm not law enforcement. I don't know how to get into detection dog world. You guys actually are in one of the fields that you don't have to have that military law enforcement background. And a lot of the dogs that I've seen in the bio world is growing bigger and bigger all the time. Like the number of dogs that are getting used in some type of biodetection, whether it be agricultural stuff, which kind of goes in line of conservation dogs, but also bio in the sense of bringing in vegetables or fruits that are diseased. And then the medical side of things that you guys are doing, these are fields that people can get into. What would you tell somebody who's potentially looking to become just like you? What advice would you give somebody?
I would say if you have a dog at home, go into the nosework community, work a sport dog. I think very much there you learn how to read a dog, but also that you get the accessibility to read other dogs. I personally did nosework and heavily tracking as well, and tracking is one of my favorite pet sport dogs activity. That's really good starts. And then, like, for example, doing your webinars and all those kind of things, like, get as much knowledge as you can, because I think you don't need to be in the military background, but you want to have the knowledge how you teach a dog. So what we learned this weekend, for example, with markers and when to reward the dog, when to move, when not to move, how to play with the dog, all those things are super important when you want to work with the dog. And if you already have a head start on that and I don't have to train you that's brilliant.
Yeah, that it front loads you, and you're investing in yourself. You're investing in educating yourself, investing in understanding detection dogs. Now, what if someone came to you guys and said, hey, I've been doing nose work. My dog is fantastic. It's awesome. Very sound dog. Can I also now train this dog to do C-dif or something like that? So it's still a no on that.
It's still a no on that.
So they have that dog for sport, but if they wanted to find something, then they need to have a dog that does that type of job.
Absolutely.
Okay.
Yes. So we choose the dogs who will come into the program. You cannot bring your own dog with you, because I always say, like, the one of the most popular scents is birch. Birch can be like in cleaners and all those things. So is the dog alerting on C-dif, or is the dog alerting on the birch in the solution that people use to clean? So we're very strict on that. It's same thing as with pathogens. The dog is not trained on any other odors as well. Like, I wouldn't take even my detection dog tracking or something. That's a no-no for him.
Could you see, or can you even think of, is there other types of bio dogs, pathogen-wise or whatever, that would be good in hospital environments besides C-dif? Is there other ones out there that maybe hospitals or people should be made aware of that a dog could be a fantastic tool for?
Oh, I'm sure there is. You just have to find that microbiology team who will support you to make you the scent. Is it safe? You need to have, veterinarians who clear. Can the dog get sick from it or not? A lot of people talk about that special fungi. I'm not such a fan of it. Do I really want to expose my dog to that? All those kind of things. But I'm sure if you have the team behind you, you can do other things as well.
That's awesome. And I guess the last thing I'll leave on is a little shameless plug, but you came to the school here with a very extensive background and a great understanding. What was something, because the message I want to share here is never stop learning. So when you came here and now you've been here for the 2 weeks, what did you walk away from? Because again, I want to say this because you came here very educated. We get a wide variety of backgrounds, and I put you at the higher end of, you've been doing this a while. You understood a lot of things that we talk about. What was something that you took away in that ever-growing learning part as a trainer?
Yeah, you never stop learning. You nailed it there. I think the instant that you block yourself from learning, you're done. Because I don't think that you can grow anymore. How you said in the lectures, you will always get a dog who will need maybe a different path, and that resonated the most with me. Sometimes you have your formula, but now this special dog comes along and you have to make it something because it's still brilliant, but I have to adjust to it as a trainer. And that was very encouraging to hear from you because you have worked so much in this world as well, for us to be flexible and to think of it as a cookbook. I love that analogy. So for me, that was really encouraging to hear. And I definitely want to say I learned a few technical things, especially with the addition of Michael in it as well. The play, like I've been lazy, I've been just doing, toss and fetch with my dog. He loves it. But yeah, maybe tugging in the hospital would be a better thing. And how can I create that? Those things that you sometimes take for granted, but you need to be reminded of it. So I really enjoyed that portion as well.
Awesome. Well, I'm glad that you were able to come out here. One, just so we could learn from you, because we had our takeaways learning from you. I loved having somebody, I know Natalie did especially, somebody who was very odor hygiene focused, making
Yes,
sure
we
that
are.
we were using gloves or cleaning stuff between each run. So that was fantastic. And thank you for coming on here, sharing the story, something that is to me very special and unique, and in a growing field that people are always looking to get in detection. This is a great opportunity.
Yes.
And I hope maybe even through the podcast or just the spread of knowledge that dogs like this get used more frequently. The ability to have these bio dogs in an environment to help people, or in some cases, help reduce the issues that may come from being in a hospital environment for extended periods of time, to be healthier and happier, is all done with a dog. And detection, which is obviously near and dear to all our hearts.
I always say I'm the most luckiest person alive to work this job. So
I feel the same. I feel the same. I'm sure a lot of our listeners and viewers feel the same way too. And those that are looking to get into it, keep grinding, keep educating yourself, keep trying, keep thinking outside the box. There's all kinds of detection fields that pop up all the time. And like I was saying, conservation, biodetection, all these areas are just wide open at the moment as far as possibilities go, but you have to take a lot of no's for a while before you land in a place where you can say yes, and let's give it a shot and let's see what happens. But it's out there, and don't take well, I'm not military, I'm not police, I can't get into this. Just keep trying. Would you have thought 10 years ago this is where you'd be?
No, never.
Yeah. So I hope those that are listening and watching this, that they get that same thing like you, like, wow, 10 years or how many years from now I could be in your shoes. So thank you, everybody. Thank you for coming on here.
Thank you for having us.
Yeah.
It was a lovely 2 weeks, and I can only recommend it. So
I love it. Thank you very much. And for everybody tuning in and watching, thank you for watching and listening to K9s Talking Sense, where it's okay to be nosy.